Welcome again to another segment of ACRP TV, our spotlight today on engaging minority physicians in clinical trials. My name is Michael Causey. I'm the editor-in-chief at ACRP. Our guest is Rod Walker, who's the senior director and head of patient and site solutions at Aura Inc. in North Carolina. We're going to talk about a lot of topics today, but Rod, I know we're also going to go back and forth a little bit between your day job, if you will, and your sort of outside advocacy work at Aura. Tell us a little bit about your day-to-day is about patient engagement and community engagement in a broad sense. So let's start there, but then I want to focus more on diversifying and reaching more minority populations. But if you could tell us a little bit about your day-to-day activities at Aura, and then let's talk about some of your outside work.
Sure. First, let me say thanks, Michael, and to ACRP for the opportunity to be here today and be able to have this type of conversation. So, to your point, what I do in my day-to-day role as the head of patient and site solutions is how do we engage patients first? How do we engage sites? And then how do we, look to outside of that to our communities to ensure that we have the ability to bring clinical research to patients, especially nowadays, like when you're talking about virtuality, with where we are today with COVID-19, how do we bring access to patients to clinical trials? How do we get the right sites engaged into clinical trials? And at the end of the day, if we do that right, we're going to bring the right drug to the market at the right time to ensure that we are serving our community.
Now let's talk a little bit about reaching out to physicians because, and I'd like to ask your thoughts on this about, for one thing, why has this been such a difficult problem in the industry? We have banged our head against the wall on this, trying to engage more minority physicians to get them on board with clinical trials and to become more clinical trial advocates. So I guess a two-part question: why has it been such a challenge, and what kind of activities are you seeing maybe that will turn the tide now?
Yeah, I think, the challenge really within the industry historically has been from a clinical research perspective. We always go to the same site and the same physicians. Sometimes it's the key opinion leaders, and sometimes it's just sites that do very well in clinical research. So we never really have the opportunity to think outside of those sites to go to as a site for clinical research, one. And so because of that, it does limit the ability to expand, to a site that we normally don't think about. And so to that instance, if you start thinking about what markets, what regions that we go to, I don't think we as an industry have looked at the opportunity to really diversify that. And so how do we do it is by looking at different regions. We need to look at where the minority physicians potentially are, because if you find that minority physician, they're potentially going to have that minority patient population. So you look at it in the aspect of, okay, in the US alone, what markets have that diversity patient population? You look at like Atlanta, Georgia, you look at the Baltimore, DC area, you look at Detroit, Michigan, you look at Louisiana, you look at Los Angeles. You just start thinking about other, Houston, Texas, you start thinking about other areas within the US that we need to focus our efforts on finding that physician. I think because of that, we need to find a physician, again, that maybe have a well-established private practice or maybe a community-based practice, but because they haven't done clinical research, they're overlooked. So we need to go to them. We need to provide them the infrastructure, the support, a mentor to the mentee to get them to understand the capability of clinical research. We don't want to be, what we see in the industry as it is. You do one clinical trial without any assistance, without any guidance, and you never do another clinical research trial again. So by doing the mentor-mentee option, that should therefore, expand the pool of investigators, keep them there, and then also expand the clinical research to their patients.
Now, COVID-19 obviously has been a terrible thing on so many levels, and it has also exposed some of the problems with the lack of patient diversity in the patient population. But having said that, do you think with COVID making clinical trials the lead item in the nightly news now, so they've raised the awareness of clinical trials so much, do you think we have an opportunity to leverage some of that new awareness to bring clinical trials to a wider patient population?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, there's no doubt about it. COVID-19 has brought clinical research, a lot of different elements of clinical research into the limelight. As you mentioned, is the diversity numbers are significant just in what we're seeing in the COVID-19 vaccine trials. The most impacted uh, patient population is the least recruited currently, and those numbers are out there, right? So that's definitely an impact. And again, that goes to another point of access to clinical trials. We just need to make sure that one, patients are educated on clinical research. So if I think about the current COVID-19 trials, are those patients, diversity, getting the education that they should understand about clinical research? Because right now, when someone says clinical research, to most African American patients, the first thing that comes out of their mind or their mouth is Tuskegee, right?
Right.
So we need to educate them that clinical research that was then is definitely different to what it is now. So
All right, let me ask you, I'm sorry, it's been such an intractable problem. Do you feel any optimism today, maybe more than in the past?
I mean, I do think so. I mean, I think there is some optimism to it, but there's still not enough. And again, if we give the basic education and engagement from day one, so they understand what the purpose of clinical research is about. It's not just about them today. Yes, it is great for them to have an option of care, right? But it's also that it's going to benefit them, potentially will benefit their children, their grandchildren, and other individuals. And if we don't know the full outcome and impact or side effect of a drug, then it won't do any of us any good down the road. So we have to make sure they understand it's not just about them. It's for them today, but it's also for the future tomorrow.
Right, such important. We've been speaking here with Rod Walker. He's the Senior Director, Head of Patient and Site Solutions at Aura Inc. in North Carolina. This has been our ACRP TV Spotlight on engaging minority physicians in clinical trials. Rod, I want to thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Mike. I really appreciate it.